Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Now, before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure we're on the same page. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than to simply manage based on the authority that comes with a title or position. What we've learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to serve people and earn influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. And if you stick with us to the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to a resource we've built that's like nothing else you've seen. With that in mind, let's get to work. This episode is the second in a series on the art of leadership learning. In this episode, we'll dig into some solid points around valuing the process of both leadership learning and unlearning the things we have gained new knowledge and insight on. This is huge, so don't miss it. We have to be willing to unlearn in the process of developing into the best leaders we can be. Okay, here we go. If you're not sure how difficult and even awkward it is to unlearn and relearn something, then try this. Try writing with your non-dominant hand. And we're thinking about this because we have to think about how difficult and awkward it can be for our individuals, for our people to learn and then have to unlearn some of the things that they may have thought most of their life. So if you think about, or if you have a chance now, or when you get a chance, take that pen and put it in your non-dominant hand and write your signature. And that's a very small part of what it feels like for your people to unlearn and relearn as we're teaching and training. It was Alvin Toffler, an American businessman and author, who said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who do not learn, unlearn, and relearn." So we call this layered learning. 10 years ago or even yesterday, you may have learned something that you thought was the absolute truth, or at least the best way you knew of. And then your perspective changed, or you learned something that made you realize you were wrong. You had to unlearn how you previously did things or saw things since you had increased in more accurate knowledge. I've heard Wes explain it this way with communication. So we do a lot of effective communication training for the workplace. So I've heard Wes explain it this way. I used to think Cindy asked a lot of questions all the time because she was questioning me. Now, after learning communication styles and what her communication style is, I know she's asking questions, seeking to understand, but not to question me. And in learning this for me as well, I learned that he needed less detail or very little detail and more bullet points. So I'm working to unlearn the way that I naturally communicate and communicate with him in a way that's much more bullet pointed, which is an unlearning process to me. So I have to be very intentional and work on this and put in the energy to communicate better with him. But as long as I remember to value the process, I'll move forward learning and applying this leadership skill, and I can recognize it in others who are more of his communication style, and I know how to better communicate with them too. And numbers show how critical valuing the process is in the workplace. So I'm going to give you a quick stat. This is Salesforce.com. A recent Salesforce.com study says 86% of the executives surveyed cited lack of collaboration and ineffective communication as the primary reason for workplace failures. So many times it's not just learning something new, but it's also this process of unlearning that we need to give ourselves and our people time for. So I gave you two simple but not really easy examples of unlearning what we've already learned. So think about this. It took us years to learn to write, at least a few years. We're in school and we're learning to write, and many more years to develop our writing if we cared to develop it, to write well. Now, I'm not talking about writing content or a blog or a book. I'm talking about just the simple, having our handwriting be more legible, the simple act of written communication we do in our everyday lives. If you suddenly could no longer write, though, with that non-dominant hand and had to start writing everything with your other hand, it would be difficult. And it could also take a few years, just like the first time you learn to write, as you're relearning this process. This is also why repetition and layered learning is important to you and your people learning, or well, in this example, to you learning to write with your non-dominant hand, and for you and your people learning anything in a different way than you were originally used to. So when applying this to valuing the learning process of developing ourselves and our people, it's no different. There's an unlearning and relearning process that has to take place for successful results to occur. And that takes repetition and revisiting the ideas and reevaluating what we've learned and applied, and then taking a look at what we still need to practice on. What else do we need to improve on? Taking action and gaining ground there. So fundamental lesson 2 is about don't shy away from losses. Because the only way that we can learn through success is through failure. John Maxwell is writing a book right now called Return on Failure. And as a matter of fact, I happen to know that he will share things like, do something so big that failure is the option. So in other words, you likely won't get it right the first time. If you get it right the first time, it probably wasn't big enough. The idea, the action, the thing you were taking on wasn't big enough. So as leaders, we need to keep that in mind. Wes and I are creating something right now that has plenty of risk. Yet I guarantee you, even in the areas that don't work out as we plan or believe they will, that we'll learn valuable lessons. We don't plan on failing, but we certainly won't shy away from losses, and we'll learn and we'll unlearn some things and then relearn a better way to create more success and value than if we had never learned from the experience. So if you intentionally take the time to learn from your experiences, you'll have less bumps in the road of life. And failure too builds resilience and frankly, even better ideas to implement than if we had had just initial success right out of the gate. So it's what we do with our failures that matter. As a kid, I felt like I had so many failures, and I did have plenty. But somehow I missed that all my friends were having failures too. I tried learning the piano, but I was mediocre and I didn't enjoy anything about it. I picked up my brother's guitar and that didn't go well either. I was pretty good at gymnastics, but when I went from a very small middle school where I was pretty good in comparison to the rest of the folks in the school, there was, maybe, I don't know, 60 or 70 of us, to a very large high school of thousands, I didn't even make the team. This can really hit your confidence and self-esteem as a kid and as an adult if we don't understand that failure can be our friend. Oh, of course, as an adult, I started learning from my mistakes. Then I realized I had some strength areas that I was pretty good at. And as I discovered strength areas and put more of my energy there, I learned avenues that I wanted to take as a career path and eventually into an area that I knew I was called to serve others in, which is leadership. But I learned that failures don't define me and they don't define anyone else, and that in order to succeed, we need to fail. I just wish I'd known that as a kid. But a big game changer for me was realizing that those who win the biggest have usually taken their failures and learned how to go again, getting better results. So a little further on this idea of don't shy away from losses, I don't know a successful person that hasn't learned from their losses in order to come back better than before by applying what they learned. Maybe you've heard some of these ideas, some of these facts of history actually, but it took Thomas Edison 10,000 attempts to perfect the light bulb. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper job for lacking creativity. I mean, imagine that. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school baseball team for lacking talent. And consider Elon Musk, whether you like him or you don't, or maybe you like some things and not others. Elon Musk, as he started a career path, applied, now this is right out of college, he applied to tech companies thinking that he would especially love to work at the company Netscape. He applied multiple times there, but he was rejected over and over. So he ended up founding a company which was an online searchable phone directory at the time, and he called it Zip2. It struggled in the early years. Investors had no interest. Then in 1996, they received a much needed investment. It was a lump sum investment, but So he was excited for a couple months. And then he was ousted as the CEO of the company and given a much smaller role in the same company. So imagine the awkwardness of that. But then Musk eventually managed to remove the CEO who replaced him when the newer CEO did not agree with the visions and principles and the values that the company had set forward before that new CEO ever came on. Elon went on to co-found PayPal, which was soon voted the worst business concept of the year. Now, we know PayPal as a thriving success now, but they had many bumps in the road. But as it became more successful, he sold PayPal for a gain of $35 million. As he started Tesla, most of the auto industry thought he would fail spectacularly. They hoped he would, and they set out to put out a lot of media saying that he would and just do anything they could to help him fail. And this was apparent in, the media articles, interviews. But in 2008, during the stock market and economic crisis, it looked like their predictions were going to come true when Tesla stock just went to the brink of collapse. There were days that it was just teetering on, this company is finished. Musk decided to bankrupt himself and used his personal fortune, that $35 million he earned from the sale of PayPal, to keep the company going. So this, built up his folks that had invested in stock and the entire organization. 2 years later, he was officially broke. Here he was, 40 years old, with a very large family, and officially broke from $35 million. A short period after the 2-year timeline, Tesla became incredibly profitable and is worth $804 billion today and had over $81 billion in revenue last year. I could talk about SpaceX and frankly Twitter as well. And what about Starlink? And I think there's another business called Neuralink or something like that. But with Starlink, what an amazing service to people in the Amazon, in Ukraine, in countless remote countries and villages that did not have communication avenues before like they do now, thanks to Starlink. So Musk is said to be the Thomas Edison of our time, and I'm frankly on board with that. So in interviews, when asked what helps him succeed, he credits learning from every loss. Now, this is kind of a long list. So when asked what helps him succeed, he credits learning from every loss, viewing failure as knowledge gained to produce a better product, independent thinking to produce the necessary results for success, working on a personal passion as a driving force rather than just working on things that he had no passion about, and making adjustments when necessary, not to be obsessed with a particular product, but more so with a product that provides a clear solution to the end user. So don't shy away from losses. Too often losses are avoided or kind of put in a box, and we don't learn from them, at least at the level that we should. So in The Art of Learning, Josh says, in an art form, failure is just as important as success. And that's a big statement. A dead end is just as important as an accomplishment. So don't get away from the idea that failure is your friend. In that book and in his story, Josh was showing us that failure was a part of the success he obtained. And in having success, we need to remember that humility will keep us grounded when those failures start turning into successes. So fundamental lesson 3 is having a beginner's mindset. So a beginner's mindset, gosh, some days we'll forget what having a beginner's enthusiasm, which goes along with mindset. But some days we will definitely forget about that beginner's enthusiasm and what it can be to be coming into something to learn and gain perspective, especially when the learning experiences come, and depending on how intentional we are in seeing the wonder in life and taking time to learn from every experience. So as we age and as we get used to a job, we can lose a lot of that, or we get used to a project that we're working on. And that the beginner's enthusiasm is what brings the energy of wonder and curiosity and really openness that helps us learn and discover. It was Socrates that said, wonder is the beginning of wisdom. So we have to keep that in mind and ask our things like, are we being curious? And curiosity asks, why and what's next and why not and what else. It's that art of wonder. Well, the beginner's mindset is filled with questions until it gets an answer. I've seen people ask questions to get your answer, and I've seen people ask questions until they get their answer, or that answer that they want. There's asking questions to get an opinion or fact from someone, and then there's asking questions to get our sense of certainty. But a beginner's mindset and that beginner's enthusiasm is open to learning. There's an excitement to find the right answer, not to justify yesterday's actions or experience, or not just to be part of the conversation. They're looking to be enlightened. So, what are you learning right now that needs a beginner's enthusiasm in your mindset? Is there something that needs you to remember the value of the beginner's mindset? And remembering that, I'll become better when I learn this lesson that I'm in the middle of right now. We have a friend right now that's in a very difficult work situation. She's an excellent leader. She's wise. She's always reading and growing and hungry to grow herself as a better leader in person. I know she has much better days ahead because she speaks often of what she's learning in this hard situation and how she can apply what she's learning in the process. So she knows that there's things to be learned, and she's wondering, she's open to learning, what are the gains for me? What am I learning while I'm in the middle of this challenge? But because she's seeking to learn, as each day brings, a heavy challenge in the process, she's committed to keep enthusiasm as she seeks to really gain knowledge from this time in her career. She's valuing the process with the beginner's enthusiasm. There's an art of learning that extends beyond what we just learn. We can be open and seek that learning. Now, learning in general, many times we look at learning as accidental. When we were kids and went to school, we just went and learned whatever the teacher had for us that day. Then as we grow into adults, we realize, like I mentioned before, some areas that we're stronger in, or maybe we have gained interest in those areas, things that we're naturally gifted in or have an area of strength we often have interest in, as well as a desire to learn more. So one thing Josh noticed about learning was his desire to intentionally learn, and that he learned some of his best lessons from losing. And he goes on to share about 2 approaches to learning. So approach 1 is called entity learning. And you can look these up. This is a well studied. Both of these approaches are well studied facts and concepts. So approach 1, entity learning, is we feel like we have achieved when we're at the top of our game. We got 100 on our test, or we just won the big game. And that's when we feel like we've achieved. What happens with this approach to learning is it says, I'm intelligent in this area. I wanted this, therefore I'm smart at this. That is entity learning. And entity learning has a fixed mindset. And the entity learning theory believes that even if people learn new things, their intelligence stays the same. And they blame their intelligence and abilities, for their achievement failures. Okay, so entity learning. The second approach is incremental learning. This approach says intelligence is not fixed and can be improved through enough effort, that we can try and fail and improve, and we can go again better than before. And that what we learn is transferable to other parts of our world. This is how Josh became good at 2 completely different skill sets. This is where we say, I accomplished because I worked really hard at it. The belief in incremental learning will blame lack of effort or strategy used to mediate negative outcomes. So those who believe in incremental learning likely act out and improve situations with more effort. They go again better than before. As Josh learned these 2 approaches that he could see his opponents had, he figured out that a win for him was not a championship trophy, but a win was becoming better for the next time out. So for us as leaders, do we embrace the struggle that is within the win? The art of learning, leadership, or anything else we're learning is in the heart of the struggle. Thanks for listening to Leading at the Next Level podcast. Next time, we'll pick up where we left off by digging into how we should rethink adversity. The power in discovering how we view things determines how we do things. If you'd like to go deeper into anything we've shared here, or you need continuing education credit for your professional credential, send us an email at admin@dove-development.net, and we'll be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial of our complete Leading at the Next Level program, and at no cost. The full program includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lesson, complete with slides and action-based assessment to help you capture measurable bottom-line improvements in your organization. And we offer 2 live lessons each month with Q&A so we can help you identify the specific action that you want to take to lead your team more effectively. Okay, thanks for joining today.